Good evening. Welcome to TIFF Bell Lightbox. How is everyone doing tonight? My name is Keith Benny. I'm the acting director of learning here at TIFF. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to tonight's special event, an advanced screening of Missing Link, the highly new anticipated film by renowned animation studio Laika with writer-director Chris Butler. To begin, we'd like to acknowledge that tonight's event is taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. It's important for us to offer these land acknowledgements as a small but essential step towards reconciliation, as a way to activate and remember the history of the land and the people who have lived here. On behalf of TIFF, I'd also like to thank our lead sponsor, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oréal Paris, and Visa, as well as our major public supporters, the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, and the City of Toronto. And of course, we'd like to send a huge thank you to our members and our donors for their generous contributions and support of our learning programs year-round here at TIFF. We are so excited to be able to present a special screening of this groundbreaking and fresh addition to the Laika universe, the studio behind, of course, the stop-motion films Coraline, ParaNorman, The Box Trolls, and Kubo and the Two Strings. We've had the honor to show many of them here at the Lightbox in years past, so we're really excited that Missing Link is here this evening. A big thank you to Elevation Pictures for providing us with the film, and of course for the Mr. Link swag bags that you received on your way in. And because we endeavor to support emerging creators as they pursue careers here in the industry, we're also very happy that students from the Sheridan College Animation Program are here with us tonight in the audience. We hope you ask some really great technical questions. Hosting the event tonight, we're very pleased to have Norm Wilner, who will join us. Yes, of course, Norm. Norm will join us following the screening in conversation with Chris. Norm is the senior film writer for Now Magazine, the host of the podcast Someone Else's Movie, and we're also very lucky to have him as the host of our subscription series, The Secret Movie Club, which is our Sunday morning film club. So please join me in welcoming Norm Wilner.
Hey, everybody. Thank you, whoever applauded for me the first time I heard that. That was so cool. I am Norm Wilner. It's my pleasure to be here to welcome you to the Toronto premiere of Missing Link. I have seen it. It's delightful. I'm supposed to tell you a couple of things about the movie, but I'm trying to couch it really carefully. It is not quite what you might be expecting from Laika, in that it is really bouncy. All the other films they've made, and I do love them all, which is one of the reasons I was like, yes, I'll do this one. Their films tend towards darkness. Their films are about usually children, young people who are pulled into worlds and emerge changed. There are no children in this film, and it really changes things. It's way sillier than it has some gravity to it. It has some weight, which is absolutely wonderful. But yeah, you're gonna laugh a lot more than you might expect you would. So it's really, really fun, and I hope you like it. I'm going to set up Chris Butler, who I first met in 2012 when he came through town with Sam Fell for the film they directed, ParaNorman, which, how many of you guys have seen ParaNorman? Show of hands. Okay. So I couldn't actually get through the interview without choking up because of the thing that happens in the big reveal in ParaNorman, which is just one of the hardest hits emotionally. And my interview procedure was basically, why did you do that to me? That was really hard. And I feel like they made this, like Chris made this to apologize to me and just, not make me cry this time. But yeah, he's been at Laika all along. I've got this right here, writer and director and head of story for Laika. He worked on Coraline and Kubo and the Two Strings as well. Prior to working for Laika, Chris amassed a decade's worth of experience designing and storyboarding on numerous high-profile animated projects, including Corpse Bride, which a lot of people slept on, but which is really good. If you haven't seen that, go look it up later. He's been nominated for an Oscar, a BAFTA, several Annie Awards, and a GLAAD Media Award. He made his directorial debut with ParaNorman, which he also wrote. Missing Link is his solo venture. And he will be joining me for a conversation afterwards, so please stick around. What else can I tell you? I'm not going to tell you anything else. Meet Missing Link. You're going to like it. See you afterwards. That is, in fact, not true. I have things to ask you. But honestly, thank you. This was a pleasure. And before we get to the actual meat of the interview, was this just a way of making up for me crying at ParaNorman? Did you want to give me something nice?
No.
Remember, film critics always think it's about them, and it never is. But to start with, where did the idea come from, and how long did it take to develop it into a feature film?
I keep telling people it was about 15 years ago, but the truth is it could be longer. In fact, every time I talk about it, I change the number. But the point being that it was a long, long time ago when I thought, wouldn't it be great if stop motion had its own kind of action hero? I remember when I was talking about ParaNorman and what influenced ParaNorman, I always used to talk about the kinds of movies that I loved as a kid. Zombie movies, I know, weird, but you know, horror movies and John Hughes movies, and I kind of covered that with ParaNorman. The other stuff that I liked as a kid was Indiana Jones, Sherlock Holmes, Ray Harryhausen's in here as well. So yeah, I think I wanted to make like a stop motion Indiana Jones movie, kind of.
Where Marion is a 7-foot tall Sasquatch.
If you like,
I mean,
yeah.
their relationship is the core of it, right?
Yeah, it's definitely their relationship. Yes,
yeah. It's lovely and it's sweet and it's weird. It's unapologetically.
That's
weird.
me.
Yeah. Well, so, and yeah, ParaNorman was as well. I mean, they're very distinctive stories, but then again, that's the sort of thing Laika is known for, that they just take the ball and run with it, or that they'll let a filmmaker take the ball and run with it. So I'm jumping ahead in the list of things, but the collaboration with Laika that you've been doing for a decade now, I suppose, right? ParaNorman has started in
13 years.
13 years.
I went for Coraline. Yeah,
oh, that's right.
I agreed to work for 6 months on Coraline, and that was 13 years ago. Yeah.
Coraline's finished.
Yeah, I stayed.
Okay, just in case there's another cut coming that I don't know about.
No.
So yeah, how does that evolve? How do you start working on one project and then end up directing a flagship release?
I think, well, when I was working on Coraline, I had a script, which was ParaNorman, that I showed to Travis, and he loved it and said that we should make this movie and you should direct it, which was a shock. But I thought, why not? And it was a similar thing, actually. After ParaNorman finished, he said, what do you want to do next? And I had 3 different scripts, or I had the first act of 3 different scripts. And I didn't want to pitch anything to him. I'm not overly keen on the whole pitching process. I think sometimes it becomes about showmanship and not about the project. So I just gave him these 3 scripts and said, read them, and you pick. And I liked them all, but I did have a favorite. And fortunately, it was this one. And this was his first choice. And I think it was probably for similar reasons. It felt like it was a change of direction. There was lots of things going on here that we hadn't done before as a studio. And I think you touched on it earlier. I think one of the most appealing reasons for both of us was that the protagonists were not anguished 11-year-olds.
Yeah. I mean, it's a brand that works, but this is so
now they're
different.
Anguished 35-year-olds instead.
But they're anguished for their own reason. For I guess for adult reasons. There's a melancholy to Susan's predicament. He knows he's the only one, and Sir Lionel just needs to learn to listen. Ultimately, but
yeah, I mean, to me, it's about empathy. You know, when you start writing one of these things, it's good to have a theme in mind, and the theme from day one was fellowship or friendship. And as it evolved, see what I did there? I thought, you know, I also wanted part of the message to be that your identity is what you give yourself, not what other people give you, and that's how it moved forward.
And you do have we spoke about this very briefly beforehand, but the thing that, again, that ParaNorman has the reveal that wowed me. This one has, very simply, the twist you don't see coming, which is that the Yeti are jerks, that they reject Susan, and he has to deal with that.
Yeah. It's okay to talk about this because you've all seen it.
Yeah.
But normally I have to tell people to stop.
Don't tell anyone.
No, that was important to me from the start. We were talking a little bit about this earlier. I, for one, feel that it's a mistake for all children's entertainment to sell this idea that if you try, you can succeed at anything, because it's not true. You can't. Sometimes you fail. And I think the important lesson is that when you do fail, you pick yourself up, look in a different direction, and keep going. And I think that's what this is a little bit, is that they, Link and Lionel, and Adelina to start with to a certain extent, they all believe that their future lies in one direction, and it doesn't. And finding that out, I think, is the heart of the movie.
Yeah, and to do that, you also have to cast people who can pull it off, because that's a really difficult, I would imagine, difficult emotional arc to do without the benefit of your face. If you're doing it, like Galifianakis has this incredible sweetness, but also is able to disconnect himself. He can go blank with his voice, which Susan does a couple of times, which I was just amazed by.
He was my top choice for Susan, and I think it's because his brand of comedy is unusual in that it's a lot about vulnerability, it's a lot about displacement, it's a lot about awkwardness, and how in any dynamic he's not quite fitting in, he's not quite getting it. And that seemed perfect for Susan. I think it would have been very easy to make Susan this clownish buffoon, just the sidekick throughout the movie, but the movie was more than that to me. I wanted it to be, well, Link really is the heart of the, hello.
Yeah.
There he is. I wanted him to be the heart of the movie, so there had to be something much more complex going on there.
Yeah, I mean, just the way the proportions of the face are so...
It's like a flower.
Well, yeah, but also...
Actually, he's based on his design is based on a really early drawing that I did that I tried my best to get away from, but we just kept going back to it. And it was a sketch that I did in a notebook 15, 17, whatever years ago. And it's since become known as the hairy avocado drawing. And but everyone liked it. There was something very simple about it. And I think that was the key to the look of this movie, was these big, simple shapes. And with Link, you just want to hug him.
Yeah. And the hair looks like petals or plumage, or they look like feathers in some shots when the wind's blowing through them.
Well, that was another stylistic choice, because I wanted to be quite stylized with the design of the movie. I wanted it to be quite graphic, quite playful. And there are different schools of approach in stop motion to hair. You have the kind of taxidermy school, like the Wes Anderson movies, where it's almost like stuffed animals moving. And usually in that, you get a certain amount of crawl or chatter, where you see how the animator has manipulated the fur. And that is an aesthetic in its own way, and it's beautiful, and I love it. But this wasn't that. And to me, the important thing was the hair on the heads of the other characters, on like Lionel's chin, is very stylized. So it makes sense that the hair on Link needs to be stylized too. And we tried all kinds of different methods and different materials. But in the end, because it needed to be so graphic, we ended up sculpting it, individually sculpting all those tufts out of clay and then casting that. And so he is a silicone puppet.
I'm just trying to picture how, I mean, in the wind scenes when they're ruffling, you can actually see it move in waves.
Yeah.
How complex is that?
So with each of our movies, I think we learn a lot from the movies that we've done before. Each time, I think we innovate, we push the boundaries a little, and what we learn from that, what didn't work from that, we tie into the next movie. And Monkey from Kubo was quite problematic as a puppet in terms of when she's in the blizzard scenes, how do you animate all that? And they came up with numerous methods of doing that, and one of them was individual maneuvering of the tufts. And it just became clear very quickly that that wasn't going to be possible in this movie. I wrote a movie in which there's a naked Sasquatch in 90% of the movie. So, we tried various rigging techniques where you've got individual wires connected to tufts of hair, and it just became ridiculous. Like, no animator's going to be able to do that. So we ended up UV painting the tips of those tufts, and then shooting a UV pass, and then we would give that to the digital effects department, and then they would use the UV pass to manipulate those little tufts.
So how integrated is physical stop motion and CG at this point? I mean, we saw the clip of the elephant with the green screen background, and there are a couple of other shots that you'll see coming up in this photo reel that have some green screen element to that. So where are we now?
It's incredibly integrated. I mean, we make hybrid movies. They are stop motion movies, but it would be unfair to dismiss the amount of work that VFX does. They allow us to make stop motion movies with a bigger scope and a bigger scale. I think on each movie we get that little bit better at combining the two, at comping the two, so you can't see the joins. This is a pretty epic movie. There's no physical way of, for example, building the full deck of the ship.
Right.
So at some point that deck, the practical deck stops, and then the rest of it is a digital replica. But you mentioned the elephant shot. I think it's also worth noting that every time we do anything with VFX, it's always informed by a practical asset. So the mountains in the background that are digital, someone in the art department first builds a very small, rough maquette, a miniature. I know it's all miniature, but it's more of a miniature. And then they give that to the VFX department, and they scan that, and that's what they use as their raw material. And it's the same thing with the background.
See?
No, not that. But we can keep that up. It's cool. But it's the same with the background characters and their costumes. They're always informed by something practical swatches, practical puppets, silicon. It is a constant collaboration.
Yeah, and I was sure that in the seafaring sequences that the water was digital, and in this little clip we just saw, there's people making it out of sheets.
Well, that's a lot of exploration, because we try all kinds of different methods to get there. The water did end up digital, but again, informed so much by practical elements. And actually, there were a lot of there was a very 2D sensibility to the design of this movie, a lot of patterning, and so the same patterning that you might see in the grain of wood on the floor, you will see in the foam on the surface of the water. There's cross-hatching. You'll see cross-hatching in the paint on the characters' faces, obviously in their costumes. You'll also see that cross-hatching in the clouds and in the steam. So there is unifying elements, usually 2D, that help pull everything together.
It's come so far. And that's actually one of the things I was going to ask you about, the evolution of it. But first, I just have these 3 words: Timothy Olyphant, how? Because he was not who I expected to hear come out of that puppet.
That was Travis's choice, actually. I think Travis was Justified fan, or his mom was. And, Timothy, I just love that we cast like one of the most handsome men in the world as the ugliest. It was nice. There he is.
And he has that expression tells me he's not totally sure how this is going to turn out either.
No, I think that's right. I think he's pissed. No, he was lovely to work with. And I think he was just like, really? You hired me? What?
Yeah.
No, he was great.
I just introduced a screening of Go the other night at the Royal. And again, it's like in comic mode, he finds something that he doesn't do in the serious. I mean, he's a great dramatic actor. He's a better comic actor.
Yeah.
And if you aren't watching Santa Clarita Diet, role of a lifetime. I'm not kidding. He's amazing in that. Sorry, I'm out of order now. Technological challenge, yes. So you have come from a stop motion practical background. When you started, this was before digital tech augmentation was at the level it's at now. So what's the arc? I mean, is it helping? Is it helping in a different way than you would have seen coming? Because we can never anticipate.
What are you insinuating?
Right? We're both old.
Yeah. Okay.
But you get to be a veteran.
Enough.
You're a veteran of stop motion. But how is it? I mean, the tools are helping, obviously, because we're getting things that were never possible before. But how does that work? How do you Do you resist new stuff? Are you embracing
No.
it personally?
No. I think, again, it comes down to an aesthetic choice. I love animation. I love animation in all its forms. I love Disney movies. I love Pixar movies. I love Ladislav Starovich. I love it all. I want to watch it all. And what I like most about now is that we are in a renaissance of animation, I believe, in that there are so much content out there that is different. And that is vital, I think, to the medium. So I think, you can have Wes Anderson movies that are very like old school stop motion. And that's beautiful. And I love it. You can have Aardman who have their very distinct brand, and I love that exists. We don't want to ape either of them. Again.
I was going to say it if you didn't.
Can't help it.
No.
I'm not interested in mimicking someone else, and I think what's become clear is that our brand is that we are, Travis puts it really well, he describes us as Luddites who've embraced the loom. In that, we're trying to make stop motion and embrace what is beautiful about this age-old art form, but we're not trying to make it a nostalgic piece. We are ready, and I certainly am ready, to use every trick in the book in order to make it the best possible image on the screen. I always remember sitting in a screening of ParaNorman, and it was the Angry Aggie scene. And Aggie was, she was a true hybrid. She was a physical puppet, covered over in a CG dress. Her facial animation was drawn 2D, then it was animated in Maya to be printed out. The hair on the head, the electricity, was based on molten glue and blown ink, and that went through the CG pipeline too. So she truly was a hybrid, and I remember sitting with people who were in the industry, and they couldn't quite work out how we did it, and I loved that. And there isn't necessarily an Angry Aggie moment in here, but there are plenty of moments where I think you're not quite sure how it was achieved, and I think that's part of the magic of movie making. Ultimately, though, I want to tell a story that people find compelling. I want to tell a story with characters that people fall in love with, and they're not watching the movie and being distracted by how it's made. I want them to watch the movie and be into it. And I'll like I said, I'll use anything that I can get my hands on to make that happen.
Yeah, including Emma Thompson as Yeti Tilda Swinton, which was a highlight for me.
Who gets to cast Emma Thompson as a Yeti? I think I wrote that actually when I wrote to her and asked her to do the role. I asked her if she wouldn't mind being a grotesque, hairy ape creature.
But you do it in post.
Oh, she went for it.
Yeah. It's it took me forever to figure it out. I could not recognize her voice. I actually thought you got Tilda Swinton, and then it's like, well, maybe it's Cate Blanchett. I confuse them all the time, and then it turned out that it was Emma Thompson. So, well done. But again, someone so naturally warm to play someone who has no warmth, like literally has no warmth. She's an abominable snow creature, and also no heart.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing as well. I hope we never use celebrity casting just for the sake of it. I hope we're always casting for the right voice and the right tone. A number of people have come up to me and said they can't quite work out who's done the voices in this, and that's great. I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Hugh Jackman just has that in him all the time. I think that big happy.
Yeah, that's why I went for him. In fact, he was in my mind when I was writing the script because he is like the epitome of a leading man, and I knew that Lionel was he's a challenging character because he's selfish and arrogant, and I still wanted you to be. There we go.
Yeah, he has that. He's got that.
You know what he has? He has effortless charm. So even when he's being selfish and arrogant, you're kind of on the ride with him, and that was important to me. And I did incorporate some of his features into Sir Lionel. I don't think I told him that, but he's done it now. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm bewitched. We're seeing the same image on this little monitor, and I'm trying to.
We're not just staring at the floor.
Yeah. I'm just trying to figure out how he does that with his face and doesn't cramp. I've met him. His face is rubbery in a way that you don't expect it to be. He's got that showman aspect, which comes out in Sir Lionel as well, because he's constantly performing.
Yes.
Trying to get people interested, trying to whip them up, has no idea what he's doing, but knows what he wants.
Yeah. And a fake.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm not saying Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, I was about to say.
He's an actor.
Yeah. He's faking being a fake.
Yeah.
If you can do that, you can do anything. Before we throw it open to you guys, because I'm sure you all have some questions, what is next? Is it too early to even talk about the next project?
For me?
Yeah. What do you have something going? I mean, one of the other two scripts, perhaps?
Maybe. I only finished. Literally, I finished this movie about a month ago. So since that happened, it's just been publicity. Vacation, and I do have some ideas that I want to play around with. It'd be nice to do some writing again. That's the weird thing about being writer and director. You spend the writing part on your own for several months, not speaking to a soul, and then when you're a director, you're surrounded by 450 people every day for 12 hours a day. So I want to do some writing. No offense. It'd be nice to concentrate on the writing for a bit.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely there for whatever comes up next, because this is a pretty good track record to have so far. And we have people with microphones, so if you can put your hands up and make yourselves known, they will find you, and then we can get the question out to everybody. Here we have someone. Yep, we'll get to you guys too, I promise.
Thank you for coming. That was a great film. I'm sure we all enjoyed it. I was just wondering, what was your process like working with your story artists? Like, how do you working, like your sequences? And I was just kind of wondering about that process for you.
Well, I come from story, so and I've also been working with the same story team for, well, some of them since Coraline. So there is certainly a shorthand. We are used to working with each other. I prefer a smaller story team. I think I also have a slightly different approach because I'm directing it and I'm writing it, so I pretty much know what I'm going for. So there's less kind of flailing around trying to find out what the movie is, and it becomes a little bit more about what are the shots, what's the cutting, how does this play as a movie, rather than, sometimes storyboarding can be months and months of just gag work and brainstorming, and there's less of that certainly on this movie. I mentioned before about the pitching thing. I've never really pushed the whole big studio pitching thing. And that works, don't get me wrong, and you can create wonderful movies that way, but I work with a couple of story artists who are very meek individuals. They are not showmen, but they are fantastic filmmakers. And the fact that they don't pitch, I think is good, because it means I see their work more. I think if I put them in front of a bunch of people in a room, it would get a little lost. So I try to approach it in different ways. In the end, there's quite a few storyboard artists listed on this movie, but they came in and out. And I also cast as well, kind of like you do with animators. We have story artists who are very funny, and we have story artists who aren't. And maybe they're good at the action stuff, or maybe the more emotional stuff. I think the other danger that I found over the years is that you can work with story artists who do really funny drawings. But a funny drawing is not the same as a funny joke. And when you suddenly don't have that drawing and it's a puppet that doesn't look anything like that drawing, the joke is lost. So you've got to be really careful about how you do it.
And how long was the process on this? How long did it actually take to make once it was in production?
So it's about a year of development on this, and then a year of pre-production. And we're in pre-production. We're putting the reels up, making an animatic. We started the casting process. Design is happening. We're starting to build the assets, and then production starts. Production on this was 2 years. it falls between a year and a half and 2 years. We were on the bigger side because, well, you saw it. And then there's a few months of post-production. So it basically comes to about 5 years on this one. Yeah.
Well, it's all up there. It's amazing. Yes, please. You can clap for him if you want to, anytime.
Thank you. Thank you for the bravo.
Thank you. I just want to say congratulations on this really gorgeous film. And I want to ask you, considering that many of Laika's past films have often featured child outcasts as their protagonists, what was it like trying to convey that same dynamic in an adult protagonist this time?
It's pretty easy. I mean, I was very excited to try something new. And I think Link is quite childlike and well, actually Lionel is as well. So maybe I didn't do anything different after all. No, it was exciting to me. When I'm writing, I don't want to repeat myself. Yeah, so it was pretty easy for me to switch that over.
I see the blinky here, and yes, we'll get someone down here for you guys.
I have a question about Frost's outfit with the houndstooth pattern.
Yeah.
I notice sometimes I could be watching a new show and the anchor will have like a special guest that wears like a certain patterned outfit that, for lack of a better word, doesn't really photograph well. So I was curious to know if you had any issues shooting like his costume in particular at the beginning.
Yes.
And if there were, how you went about solving that problem.
So this all lies on the shoulders of our costume designer, Deborah Cook. And very early on in the process, we were talking about what could this movie be. In fact, this was our first look image, and you can really see it. I wanted it to be about patterning, dense patterning, and color mixing. I was partly inspired by the fact that Victorians loved bright colors and dense patterning. And you always get this impression of Victorians as being, drab and gray and, fog, but it was slightly different from that. So I wanted this very rich, dense aesthetic. I talked initially to Deborah about that, and immediately she knew there were going to be problems, particularly with the moire effect, which you would get on Lionel's suit. So she had to construct a houndstooth that isn't a true houndstooth. She subtly changed the shape of the bits so that it reads differently under the camera. And then there's also, she had to do lots of exploration about the size of it too. And she has to do that anyway, because the truth of it is all these costumes are this big, and something that might not be a problem for the camera when it's human scale is suddenly a big problem when it's that scale. So she's constantly at the start, she's sourcing fabrics. We print a lot of our own stuff. We paint a lot of stuff because you can't buy stuff that's maybe this scale. And the other thing that she has to worry about is that the thread itself doesn't get too thick, because again, that will blow the scale straight away. So right at the start, before we've shot anything, she is getting swatches, she's creating forms just out of fabric, and she's shooting them and turning them and just trying to get a head around how it's going to work on the camera. That's all on her. I just say, I want that. And she says, okay. And then cries herself to sleep.
Yeah. My wife's a knitwear designer and just stares at these things and just keeps doing this to figure out the scale. It's hypnotic. We have someone up there, and if we could get a mic down here, there's some people with some questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing this with us tonight. My question kind of relates to what is it like a typical day on set when filming as a director? Because obviously with like a live action movie, you could imagine, it's very fast paced. You might be able to have kind of conversations with the actors, and they may kind of even bring their own flair to certain characters. But with this, there's such a level of control, and it's such a like laborious, or not laborious, but it's a
careful.
thought out process, and I imagine rather slow if you're kind of shooting 24 frames a second. So I kind of wonder, sort of, what a typical kind of day might look like for you. Does a lot of it begin with kind of, like you were saying, all the pre-stuff where you're maybe like choosing facial expressions or whatever it might be?
It's a bit of everything. I mean, you're totally right. If it's not like I'm sitting on set, because then I'd just be sitting in a unit with an animator for weeks, and that's not anything that I'm prepared to do. There is an animator here with us tonight, I believe. Mike, where are you? All right, I didn't say stand up. Sit down.
Director.
Goodness sake. So, what was the question? No. A typical day when you're in production. A director in animation spends an awful lot of the day in the edit suite, because that's the hub. That's where everything's coming in, hour after hour after hour. And if you think that, I think there were 96 maybe units on this movie, which means a unit is like a portion of a set. It's a curtained off section of the floor where someone is working. Either an animator is animating or someone is setting up another shot. But 96 of them at the, when we're in the middle of production, that's an awful lot of stuff going on. And I'm just waiting for it all to come in. So I'll get in like a few frames of a new shot that they're setting up. I'll get in frames of lighting, and I'm constantly giving notes, and different people are coming in to edit. With the animators, that's the lion's share of the time that I spend, because they will come in and I'll talk through the shot with them. I'll usually talk through I always talk through the sequence with them. We try to get an understanding of what's going on, why this scene is playing, whose scene it is. And you also cast different animators to different scenes because you want them to own a certain section of the movie. Then they go away. If it's a complex shot, they'll do a block, which means they're kind of figuring out where the puppet fits throughout the shot. And then they'll do a rehearsal, which means they do the shot twice, essentially. They'll do a rehearsal, not on singles, but they'll either do it on doubles or less than that, again, depending on complexity. And that's where I will sit with them and talk through that performance and give notes, and then they will go for it. And the next attempt is the shot itself. So if you multiply that by, many animators and then many sets, many cameramen, that's a lot of the day already gone. So I do spend a lot of time in edit. Oftentimes I'll have to go out to a unit to look at a problem, or look at a bit of a tree or a painting on a wall, or even just to come up with a composition. So that's a typical day.
Yeah. So what was there a single most complex shot? Is there one killer shot in this that, not necessarily one that's stunning to us, but that was the most difficult to attempt?
I can't put my finger on a single shot. The whole thing was just... When I'm writing it, I'm thinking, oh, this will be fine. No, there was lots of stuff. The action sequences on this were pretty huge, as you could probably tell. I think all of them took over a year to shoot. There's an awful lot of planning that has to go into the action sequences. And my approach for these ones in this movie was that I wanted to approach it with a certain live action sensibility. And that meant a lot of quick cuts. Now, quick cuts is the first thing that you throw out the window in stop motion, because I've got shots in this movie that are like 10 frames long. That's less than a second. It still takes 2 days or 3 days to set that shot up. So usually that's the kind of stuff that the producer's saying, no. No, but we wanted to do it because we knew it would give it a certain kinetic vitality that you don't often see in this medium. So I'd say the action sequences, the ice bridge thing was hard work.
Yeah. And the when the shot of Link in the forest was up behind us for a second, I was just starting to think the tree in the front kind of looks like the ice block construction for the end? Was
Oh
there
yeah, it's
conscious
almost
mirror?
like it's purposeful.
Yeah, is there conscious mirroring that goes in throughout?
Oh yeah, yeah, yep. There is a certain language of form and shape that runs through these whole movies. You know, I've worked with Nelson Lowry, the production designer, many times. Again, there is a shorthand with us, and I think this was the perfect time for this movie because he wanted to do something different. He wanted to. I think when I said to him, "I want this to be the most colorful thing that we've ever done," he was like, "Okay, yeah, you know, I'm in." But he is. I've never known anyone quite like him in stop motion because he comes at it not just from a designer's point of view, but from the point of view of an art director or someone who works on the stages, making these things real. So I think the cohesion of this movie is a lot down to him.
It's a marvelous accomplishment. Yes, please. And then if somebody could, they've been waiting very patiently.
Thank you. This movie largely follows Lionel's perspective. Why make that choice instead of following, say, Susan's perspective from the get-go?
I think because I wanted Susan to be a mystery. It's interesting because when I first started this project, it was more about Lionel's journey. In fact, I think the first story that I wrote with Sir Lionel, there was no Susan. It was completely different creatures. And then because I can't help myself, I wrote a sequel, which was about Bigfoot. And I was like, this one's better. So this should be the story. But I think introducing Link in this way as this stranger to society is the way to introduce him because he's stepping out into this big world. He's stepping out into the audience in a way. I don't want to know everything he's thinking. I don't want to be that much in his head at the beginning of the movie. I think following Lionel, there is more of a journey to make with Lionel because he does start so selfishly. Actually, we did produce. I'm just trying to, get a book sold here. But we did produce a storybook for kids about Link's life in the forest that's really adorable. And I had a lot to do with that, but I didn't write it, so you might like it. But yeah, it always seemed like it was right to tell it from Sir Lionel's point of view because Link is a mystery. He's a cryptid. He's something that humanity hasn't seen before. So I wanted to see him. I wanted the audience to see him like he was a mystery being, unraveled.
Yeah, there was never any doubt in my mind that the letter came from Susan.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just, of course.
Because it was written so badly.
Well, because it was so gentle.
Yeah.
Because the tone was so sweet.
Yeah.
And just what I knew about the film going in is like, oh, okay, either it's the Sasquatch or a child has befriended the Sasquatch. And that seems like a bigger deal too. That would be harder to pull off narratively because you'd have to leave whatever journey's happening. The child probably couldn't come along. The child must have a family. Therefore, Link is the child. And it just set it up perfectly because now I know what kind of vibe the film has. I know what the emotional stakes are. And it just sounds like, I'm lonely and I want help being found.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, the whole point.
Yeah.
I'm fine. Sorry. Up there, then down here.
Hello. Oh my gosh. So I'm graduating in like a week or so from Sheridan
Congratulations.
College. Thank you. Oh, I'm over here, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm graduating in a week or so, and I'm hoping to get my little foot into the big wide world of stop motion. I've loved it since first year. And I just have a question, like, what do you look for in like an animation assistant or a junior animator when someone just wants to start out like a fresh baby?
I think there are different people in the studio who could probably answer that better than me. I lean heavily upon the animation supervisor. On this movie, it was Brad Schiff. On ParaNorman, it was Brad Schiff. On Kubo, it was Brad Schiff. Yeah, and he is very involved in that decision making. So I think that's more of a question for someone like him. For me, I always think that people who come to the studio who've gone to the effort of making their own stuff, I mean, you're going to have that. But building up a portfolio, proving that you can do this stuff, and having multiple styles for me. I mean, I'm often looking at storyboard portfolios and design portfolios rather than the animation stuff. But I'm always looking for someone who proves that they have versatility and that they can follow a brief. Have you been in touch with Laika at all? Oh, okay. You should do, because they do internships as well. And a lot of people from the internships stay. Oh, really?
Oh, so you got an in.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah, no, if I've learned anything from covering the industry for as long as I've been covering it, you never know where the opportunity will be, and you'll never know who can leverage you. Like, people recognize talent, people bring up people all the time, and
that's right. Don't sit there and think, oh no, that's not going to work. Just try.
Yeah, do everything you can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi. I just want to know how you got into the film business.
Oh. So there is a family legend that suggests that I was born with a pencil in my hand, and as gynecologically unpleasant as that sounds for my mother,
I'm glad you said it.
I was apparently drawing from an early age. There is a drawing that I did of an elephant. I think I was either 2 or 3. My mum kept it. And the legs are in perspective. And I'm not bragging. But, no, I often think, if I could do that then, why aren't I better now? But I think it was like innate. Like, I knew I wanted to work in animation. I hungrily devoured it. I read everything I could about it. So there was, and I was lucky enough that I had family that supported that encouraged it. So there was never really any doubt that I was going to go into animation. The older I got, the more I got interested in film rather than just like Disney movies. And then film theory was a real eye-opener for me, really starting to study film and understanding it. And that, blew my mind. But right from day one, I aggressively pursued it. I always said I intended to direct my first movie before I was 40, and I just did it. And then number 2 is 45, and it's like, oh, really? That slow? So watch out for number 3 when I'm 50.
If it's worth doing, it's worth doing at the time it takes. Yes, way up top, I think, and then we might have time for one more question.
Hi. First of all, hi.
Oh, thank you.
That was really beautiful, really well shot, really well written. I just wanted to ask, so who is Susan? Like, who's your Susan?
Who's my Susan?
Yeah. Why Susan?
Why Susan? Wait, how metaphysical are we being?
Do you mean Susan the inspiration for Susan?
Yeah, like why
the original
that
Susan.
name?
Why? Oh, why the name?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, like Susan's beautiful. Don't get me wrong. I love it, but just like why not like?
Yeah, for that moment, I wanted something that would, be a verbal shock, if you like. I wanted it to land. I wanted it to land as a gag, but more importantly, I think, that's. I'm assuming that you've all seen the trailer maybe before coming here, and I was against the trailer having the Susan bit in it because it just makes it a gag. And for me, it was about much more than that. It was about this character who's choosing who he is, choosing his identity. And alongside that, it was a character who is selfish and awful, who is attempting for the first time to accept and have empathy, perhaps for the first time. So that moment, it could have been afterwards. I was like, was Susan the right one? Margaret, maybe, or something like that. But I knew it had to be like immediately gettable. As to who my Susan is, I think unfortunately, I think I'm a Susan. I think I'm my Susan. Is that weird? A little bit, yeah.
I don't know that Margaret Susan, I'm going to film critic for a second.
I say Margaret because Zach said that as an ad lib,
Ah.
and I was like, no.
Susan
Do
is,
it the way it's written.
Susan is there's no harshness to it. Like Margaret,
Yeah, it's gentle.
there's no like
soft.
The standard comedy rule is go for a
Are there
hard
any
K.
Susans in here? Few.
Good for you. Oh, you made that up. Do we have one more? Yes, somewhere up there.
Well,
Oh,
of course, thanks so much for the movie. The
Thank you.
production design was wonderful. I always think that animated movies should compete awards for production design and costume design because the level of detail is ridiculous. So I'm surprised nobody has asked this so far. Tell us a little bit about the female character, about Adeline. It's a wonderful character, super empowered. I love the ending, how she's not a romantic interest at all, but I'm also intrigued about her previous life. I mean, the fact that she's Latina or Mexican, the fact that she's, what was that backstory that she has? What was the competition between the two friends, and why did you decide to add this character to the movie?
Well, I knew I needed another character to add to this dynamic because it couldn't work just as these two characters. I think going into it, the reason that she's Latina is that I wanted her to feel displaced as well. She was married to this guy. She moved to America. He died, and it's Victorian times, so she's expected to stay at home and in mourning. And she used to be this, adventurous. And actually, there used to be a little bit more in the script. They originally met, Aldous and Lionel and Adelina met in the jungle, hunting the chupacabra. And I think, if my memory serves correctly, Adelina shot Lionel by mistake. There was a little bit more there, but as as the movie evolves, and you have to try and fit it into certain parameters, that became less important. The ending was probably the first thing that I wrote about her. Right from day one, I knew that was what she had to become. All these characters are trying to find where they fit in, and where she fits in is not with these guys. They belong to each other, but she actually belongs on her own adventure. So I started with that, and then I worked backwards. That was there from the start. I've had people actually since then say, "Did you change the ending because of everything that's happening?" And I was like, "No. It's strange to me actually how timely this movie is, considering that a lot of the elements in it I started writing 15 years ago. But that to me just says that they needed to be talked about in movies more."
Yeah, thank you for asking that because I blew past it. And yeah, thank you guys for coming out. We have to call it for time, but it was an absolute pleasure to sit here with all of you.
Thank you, everyone.
Chris Susan Butler.